This particular ministry is the first one right after the partition of the subcontinent. Um, so Jinnah was the first Governor General of Pakistan. Liaquat Ali Khan was the Prime Minister after Khwaja Nazimuddin. Khwaja Nazimuddin was the first Prime Minister of Pakistan. Okay, so and we need to let's look at the first one, the first important act which was introduced during the tenure of Liaquat Ali Khan, which is PRODA. PRODA was Public Representative Officers Disqualification Act. So Liaquat Ali Khan, he basically observed that some officials, government officials, were guilty of corruption. They were breaching their duties and they were not sort of fulfilling their jobs properly. So some of them were removed under this act. So Prada was an act which was sort of applied over people who were dishonest, who were corrupt. And yeah, so they used to remove people from the government offices with the help of this act. Later, this act was used negatively. It was misused by the ruling elites against their political opponents, which means that they used to just use the name of this act and remove the people they just wanted to remove from the government. So it was misused badly. So Prada, being a very positive, or was a very good step which was introduced, but later it was misused. So this law has its downsides as well, right? Then Liaquat Ali Khan, another important contribution to Liaquat Ali Khan was the Liaquat Nehru Pact. Nehru was the Indian Prime Minister at that time. Liaquat Ali Khan was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So what they did was they signed this pact, which was to provide a free passage to the refugees. So they introduced a visa system between both of the countries, and just so the refugees could travel easily. Nobody would ask them where they were going if they had a visa to travel to the other country, right? From India to Pakistan and Pakistan to India. And yes, this was just to ensure that the rights of these minorities and the refugees were protected. Then there was this Rawalpindi conspiracy. Guys, so this Rawalpindi conspiracy was an attempt by the army chief of that time, Chief of General Staff, Major General Akbar Khan, and 14 other army officers who tried to remove Liaquat Ali Khan from office. So some army officers were unhappy with the government. They began to plan a coup to take over the government. Against them, amongst them was Major General Akbar Khan, Chief of General Staff, and 14 other officers. So Ayub Khan discovered this act, and it was sort of Ayub Khan and all of the other uh, officers were arrested. They were tried. They were imprisoned. Right. So what this tells us about the political system, the very immature political system of Pakistan in the very beginning, is that obviously the government was not performing well, considering it was just 1 year to Pakistan's establishment. We were not very, you could say, established at that time. There was a lot of political instability. Liaquat Nehru Pact was an evidence of the refugee problem which was still there. Pakistan was not able to provide enough to the refugees for the resettlement in the country. But this conflict, which started from 1948 between the civil government and the military of officials, was a very unfortunate start of the political ministries of Pakistan. So yeah, the government, the army officers tried to remove Liaquat Ali Khan, but the coup was discovered by Ayub Khan and it was made unsuccessful. Now, another important step during the ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan was the objective resolution. Objective resolution was a draft of the constitution which was presented by the Basic Principles Committee. So Liaquat Ali Khan formulated this Basic Principles Committee. Basic Principles Committee was a committee which was responsible to draft up a constitution for Pakistan, a new constitution, because up till now the Government of India Act was followed as the official constitution, the Act of 1935, right? So now Pakistan, after this independence, needed to um, have this, you could say, have a new constitution. So this Basic Principles Committee was responsible to draft up this new constitution. They presented the first draft of it, which was called the Objective Resolution. Okay. And this Objective Resolution stated that Allah is the source of all lawmaking and that no law would be made against Islam, and with the guarantee of fundamental rights of citizens. And it was criticized by ulemas for not being pure Islamic, although it did contain some of the contents regarding the Islamic principles, the Sharia law, the guarantee of Sharia, right? But at the same time, some of the ulemas, they considered this as an un-Islamic law, and they wanted more of an Islamic content in the formulation of the constitution, right? This is why it was rejected. It was also rejected by the provinces because there was an issue of seats. We'll look at the reasons for the rejection of the Objective Resolution draft as well. Okay. Then moving on to the Basic Principles Committee, I just explained what this committee was, right? A committee to draft up a constitution. We'll see in detail as to how you can attempt a 4-mark question on what was the Basic Principles Committee. So the committee was made to make the outlines for the Constitution of Pakistan. When the Basic Principles Committee presented the first draft of Constitution, it faced a lot of criticism from East Pakistan on the issue of equal number of seats and Urdu as national language. So this look at this another reason for the criticism. The East Pakistanis and the West Pakistanis. Guys, you need to understand that at this point in time, Pakistan had these two wings, the East Pakistan wing and the West Pakistan wing, and they were separated by hundreds of miles through sea. You had to travel either by air or by sea. There was no land connection between East and West Pakistan. Let me just show you guys the map of Pakistan. Um, just after independence, just a second. Yeah, look at this. This is a then versus now comparison. This used to be the West Pakistan, and this used to be East Pakistan. This is how far these two wings were. All right. So, okay. So I hope you guys can now see the geographical differences that were there, and then the political differences as a result. There was always this conflict on the equality of seats. West Pakistan always had got more seats. East Pakistanis demanded more seats, right? They wanted Bengali to be the official language. West Pakistanis wanted Urdu to be the official language. Then ulemas criticized the draft of not being pure Islamic. Therefore, it was handed back to the Basic Principles Committee for reconsideration. Guys, is this all clear up till now? Yeah. Okay. Why was it so difficult to agree on a new constitution in 1950? Now we're looking at the constitutional crisis as to why there were so many problems here. So opposition by the East Pakistan, this is the first reason as to why nobody could agree on a new constitution. It became difficult to agree because East Pakistan opposed the draft of constitution presented by Basic Principles Committee. There was equal number of seats for both East and West Pakistan. East Pakistan wanted more number of seats because of their high population. Moreover, Urdu was suggested national language because of against Bengali. Therefore, the disagreement between the two wings of Pakistan made it difficult to draft a constitution. Then the opposition by ulemas, you guys know this. And the last one is the opposition from political leaders, also caused the issue in drafting constitution. Political leaders in Pakistan opposed the emergency powers of head of state as they could be misused, and there was no solution if the powers were misused. Moreover, little provincial autonomy was given to them, so they criticized and rejected the initial drafts. Guys, listen up. So here, this very important point regarding the emergency powers was criticized. This constitution draft, the objective resolution stated that the head of state would have emergency powers. The emergency powers are basically this control, this control to um, with the head of state, the president or the prime minister of that time, who can just amend any law anytime, can dissolve the assemblies anytime if the situation demanded. So it was just up to the head of state of that time, the president or the prime minister, to just use this law in whatever way they wanted to, right? So this was a very sort of, it had a lot of loopholes. So political leaders, they criticized this emergency powers law. They were like, ये तो बहुत मिसयूज हो जाएगा, कभी भी जब किसी का दिल करेगा असेंबलीज डिसॉल्व कर दी उठा के, कोई भी रीजन बना दी. This was not fair, right? And then the last one was the provincial autonomy. A lot of the provinces wanted power, autonomy, right? But Jinnah was not in favor of provincial autonomy. Now, guys, here's a question for you guys. You've studied how Jinnah was always in favor of provincial governments and provincial autonomy before partition. But why did Jinnah change his stance after partition? Why did he not want a provincial autonomy for Pakistan now?
So because he didn't want like East Pakistan to have a lot of power.
Okay. Essentially, Jinnah was not in favor of provincial governments because that could just give rise to a lot of conflicts between the provinces. Pakistan was newly established, and a federation uh, could have unified the entire country, right? Giving power to the provinces could have been a wrong step, because if you, let's say, had given power to all of the provinces, you were like promoting, I mean, not promoting populism in a way that everyone would just start demanding for more power, for their rights, for their policies to be implemented, and that could just create a lot of chaos for a newly established state like Pakistan. So a federal form of government was the solution, right? Do you guys get this?
Yeah.
Okay. How successful was the ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan during 1948 to 1951? So, guys, this the successes and failures of Liaquat Ali Khan now. Just look at this answer. You can write about Prada as a success, and Prada can also be written as a failure, by the way. So, they've written 4 failures and then 3 successes. So we can follow the same pattern because mostly this ministry was a failure. Okay. So let's look at the first one. Prada proved to be a big failure of the government. It was initially a good law which was made to eliminate dishonest and corruption from Pakistan, but later on it proved to be a bad law when elite class misused it against their political opponents. This was why it was considered a failure. Then the disunited military, they began to plan a coup to take over the government. Amongst them was Major General Akbar Khan, Chief of General Staff, and 14 other officers. Their plan was discovered by Ayub Khan. This showed that there was no civil military coordination and it was a failure, right? So the civil military coordination is very important for successful government tenure in Pakistan. Another failure of the Ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan was the inability to make constitution. A draft of constitution was presented by the Basic Principles Committee, but it faced much criticism from East Pakistan religious groups and political leaders. Therefore, the Ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan could not take firm steps in making constitution for the country, and it failed. Then there was the Hyderabad issue. The Nazim of Hyderabad wanted to join Pakistan. The Indian government, however, was determined to not to allow Hyderabad to join Pakistan. In August 1948, Hyderabad filed a complaint before United Nations organizations. Before it could be heard, Indian troops entered. Kashmir issue was already a cause of small-scale war between India and Pakistan. UN organized a ceasefire between the two countries. So what they're talking here is the Ratcliffe Award issue, the boundary award issue, right? The problems were still there. The Hyderabad issue was there. The Kashmir issue was not resolved. Even after the UN ceasefires, the tensions were still there, and Pakistan and India were on a war, constant conflict, right? And then there were some successes as well. For example, the Liaquat Nehru Pact. It was assigned to provide safe passage to the refugees. Visa system was introduced, right? Then another success was the objective resolution. Just the fact that the Basic Principles Committee was successful in drafting the first draft of the constitution, this was itself a success, and it showed that now the country was actually moving towards the formulation of its first constitution. It was on the it was on the road to just its first constitution. This itself is a success. And then PRODA, just the fact that PRODA was introduced and an attempt was made to remove corruption from the office was another success of the ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan. And then at the end, if you're writing four failures, you'll evaluate this ministry as a failure with a proper justification. I hope this is all clear to you guys, because this is all from the ministry of Liaquat Ali Khan.